The modern Prometheus. Now, you probably know from Greek mythology or Hollywood film, Prometheus was a titan. The Titans were the children and the grandchildren of the gods of Olympus. And like many children, they were difficult. They fell out, and Prometheus fell out with Zeus. Not a good thing. But Prometheus had his good points, and if you know your Greek mythology, your classical studies, you'll know that Prometheus brought three things to humans: fire, knowledge, and enlightenment. Fire, knowledge, and enlightenment. Unfortunately, he fell out with Zeus. And he fell out over something ridiculous about sacrifices. We don't have time to go into that now, but the fact was Zeus was so annoyed, he came down to us and stole fire back. He stole fire back from humans, and he took it back up Mount Olympus. Prometheus, being the devious little bastard that he was, went up Mount Olympus and got fire from the gods when Zeus wasn't looking. He gave it back to us. We've had it every day since. But Zeus didn't let it go. He was a tough god. And he grabbed Prometheus and he chained him to a rock. And he called an eagle to come down and eat his liver. Now, Prometheus was a demigod, so he was immortal, which meant his liver regenerated overnight. And the next day, the eagle came back and ate his liver again. He was in eternal torment. Now, interestingly, being chained to a rock and having your liver eaten is exactly the same punishment that the PSA Ethics Committee dishes out for stealing somebody else's story. But without the liver regeneration. So it's even worse. Anyway, let's leave Prometheus chained to the rock just for a minute. He'll be fine, he's immortal, he's okay. Because what I want to talk to you about is reputation. Your reputation and how you can enhance your reputation. And I want to start by talking about a family story. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes you look at your family history. And when my daughter Ellie was 14, she was very keen to look at family history. So we got on the Mormon search site, familysearch.org. We got on ancestry.co.uk. And we did a lot of research. And we found out about Aunt Em. And Aunt Em was quite famous in her time. She had quite a reputation herself, eventually a global reputation. And what happened was she was very young. She was 17 when she fell in with a married man. This is in 1814, very long time ago. Her mother had died in childbirth. She was brought up by her father, and Aunt Em took up with a married man. Bad thing now, but a really bad thing in those days, in 1814. And what happened that she fled to France. She was thrown out of the family home. She fled to France with her lover, and they travelled around France, and she wrote a book about it, and that was one of the things she became famous for, a little travelogue. And they came back, they got married, he got divorced, they got married, and eventually she had a baby, the baby died. It was a tragic time. They went to France again, ended up in Switzerland. They ended up on the shores of Lake Geneva. He was quite well-to-do. They hired a villa on the shores of Lake Geneva, and they invited friends, as you do when you've got a place overseas. They invited friends from the UK and a friend from Italy, and they had a house party that lasted 3 months. Hell of a party. And they used to sit round the campfire down by the lake and tell each other scary stories. And they had a competition one night to find out who could tell the scariest story. And the guy from Italy, called John, won. But we'll come back to that, and we're going to leave them over here. He's doing that NLP thing where he parks stories on the stage. So we're going to leave that there, okay? Because what I want to talk to you about now are 5 elements of how you can develop a world-class reputation. This will please Mark Lee. Where are you, Mark? You're over there. Hi. Because he wanted somebody with a 5 or 4-point plan. 5-point plan, Mark, okay? And the first thing I want to talk about, the first element of the plan, is to do with a luxury hotel. Now, I choose, like you, I choose my market. And my market, one of the markets I choose is luxury hotels. Why wouldn't you? You can stay in luxury hotels, you can work in luxury hotels, they pay you well, it's fantastic. And one of the hotels that I've worked in is the Burj Al Arab Hotel in Dubai. That one that looks like a sail. That iconic hotel that's on a causeway just offshore. It was on a causeway because it was going to be a casino. It was designed as a casino, but the sheikh changed his mind at the last minute. Now, the interesting thing is, you know that bar across the top, at the top of the hotel? That's a bar. I mean, it's a bar, and it's a bar. And inside, it looks like the dance floor of Saturday Night Fever. So I was doing a conference there for a company called EMC Squared. Relatively good fee, as it turned out. Thank you. I tell you, some of you are going to fall about laughing at comedy night about that. It's one of those slow burners. Anyway, relatively good fee. And what happened was, I was working with a guy called Ricardo Semler, brilliant guy, wrote a book called Maverick, absolutely stunning book. And we ended up in this bar, and you walk across the floor, and the tiles change colour. It's brilliant, and you just want to do that, or maybe that. So we did that. Everybody does that. And then at the end of the evening, we finished, and we said goodnight, come back the next day, and I went off to the bedroom, went up to my room. And one thing, I've got to admit something. I'm quite old. When you get to my age, you have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. So I woke up, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, pressed the light switch beside the bed, nothing. And I'm thinking, I'm in a 7-star hotel, and the lights don't work. Not too good. Bang, bang, bang. Couldn't get it to work. So I thought, well, I'll just go to the bathroom in the dark. You know, it's going to be difficult, but I think I know the way. I think I'll be fine. And I looked over towards the window, and I could see a kind of dark silhouette, a shape. I thought, well, I don't quite know what that is. And I looked again, and I thought it moved. And then it started moving towards me. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where you're so literally frozen with fear, you can't move. You can't speak. You can't speak. I couldn't. I was literally frozen with fear. And as I'm sitting there looking at the window, the shape's moving closer towards me, and I realise it's a man. It's a silhouette of a man, silhouette against the window, in my room. Moving silently, because it's very thick carpet in those hotels. And he reaches the side of the bed, and he leans down and says, "Can I help you?" I got my voice back at that point, and I said, "I need to go to the bathroom." Now, I tell you now, that's not the right thing to say. Because he said, "Would you like some help?" And I said, no help. No help required. And then it occurred to me, and then he leaned over and put the light on. And of course, I've been banging the call button for the easy mistake to make. I was banging the call button for the butler. Now, here's the thing. They have a butler between every 2 rooms. I'd forgotten this. It's not really a 7-star hotel. It's a 5-star hotel. The ratings go to 5. They call it a 7-star hotel because they over-deliver on everything. They over-deliver on customer service. They over-deliver on the decor. They over-deliver on the rooms, the stand of the rooms. They over-deliver on everything. And that's the first thing, first letter mark, O. O for over-deliver. If you over-deliver on everything you do, can you see the right in this light, by the way? You okay? All right, because I asked them to put the lights down, so you can't see what you do. They over-deliver on everything. So over-delivery, that's the first thing. So I'm in luxury hotel business, as you know by now. And one of the other hotels I work in, and I have to say this with no air of pretension at all, is the Beverly Hills Hotel. It's where you often stay when you're in LA. I've seen some of you there. So the Beverly Hills Hotel is part of the Dorchester collection. I work for the Dorchester here in London, as some of you do too. And I was out working there a few times. And then 3 years ago, Good Friday it was, I remember it well, Good Friday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a phone call from Ed Mady. Now, Ed Mady, you probably don't know Ed, but he's the general manager of the Beverly Hills Hotel. And I thought, well, that's great, because he's ringing me to wish me happy Easter. And I thought, well, that's great, isn't that? It's a real high level of service. But he wasn't. He was ringing me with a problem. And he said, "Alan, we've got a huge problem here at the Beverly Hills Hotel." And I said, "Oh, have you, Ed?" He said, "Or to put it more precisely, you've got a problem, because I'm their crisis communication consultant." So I had a problem. And I said, "What is it?" He said, "We've got 100 protesters outside the hotel saying boycott the Beverly Hills Hotel. And no guests are getting in or out." "Oh," I said, "what's the problem?" He said, "Well, if you don't know," and I did know, the Beverly Hills Hotel is part of the Dorchester collection owned by the Sultan of Brunei. And the Sultan of Brunei had decided to bring in a law to say that gay and lesbian people should be stoned to death. Not good. There's no way of defending that. And he said to me, "You need to come up with a line that means that our customers will come back in." Imagine that. What would you do? I don't know. I had no idea. Anyway, I couldn't, obviously, so I gave him a holding statement to say we're looking into it and it's the eventual top of the chain and it doesn't affect the hotel staff and the only people you're hurting are local people and all this kind of stuff that you would normally say. But the point of it was we set up an immediate response unit in the Dorchester Hotel, and I spent days and days and sometimes nights as well. And every time somebody said something that was damaging about the hotel to do with this campaign of boycotting in Hollywood, we would rebut it. It was an instant rebuttal unit, instant response. Eventually, we turned the problem around by saying things like it's a government-to-government problem, it's only hurting local workers, even boycotting the hotel won't make any difference to the policies in Brunei, all those sorts of things. We turned it around by having an instant unit. And that's the second element of maintaining a high-class reputation. You look out for anything that might happen that affects your reputation and you instantly rebut it, straight away. So, over-deliver, instant rebuttal. I want to talk a little bit about my heroes now, to come to the third element of this. And my biggest hero, and I've not talked about this on stage before, is my dad. And my dad was a photographer. He was a brilliant man, and what he used to do was to photograph events. He was an event photographer. He would have been at an event like this. And he used to photograph people. He used to drive home on his Norton. He had a Norton bike. I could hear the noise. I would look out my bedroom window. I was 8 years old. And he would leap over the front gate into the dark room. I'd help him. We'd be in there. I've still got the smell of fixer in my... If you've ever done any developing, you get the smell of fixer in your nose. I've still got it. Still smell it. The Ratton OB safe light, all that stuff. And I used to help him in the dark room. We used to get the proofs back to the event within an hour and a half. And he got a reputation for being the fastest photographer. He could turn things around very quickly. I used to help him with it, and it was absolutely... And his reputation sold what he did. And some of you will know, a few years ago, I only had one memento left of him. He died very sadly when I was 9 years old. He died in front of me. Fell down, had a heart attack. Terrible. But, you know, years of therapy, I'm over it now. It's fine. And I think fondly of him every day. And the interesting thing about all of that is he lived on his reputation and he got me involved in photography. And I developed a photography hero, almost a fetish, actually. I'm prepared to admit that, for a guy called Henri Cartier-Bresson. And those of you who are in photography will know that, Henri, I should say, sorry, Nabil, Henri Cartier-Bresson was one of the greatest photographers. He set up the Magnum group of photographers, some of the greatest photographers in the world. I always wanted to meet him. He only died a few years ago in his 90s. I never managed to meet him. And he came up with a concept that I was fascinated by. And it was called the decisive moment. I always wanted to meet him, but I never did. And one day I saw that somebody called Elliot Erwitt, who was a member of the Magnum group, one of Cartier-Bresson's friends, was at the Photographer's Gallery in London. And I thought, well, I'll go down. I'll pay a visit. I'll go down. And I got there early because I wanted to get my book signed. So I arrived there at 9 o'clock in the morning for an 11 o'clock signing. There was nobody there. So I sat down and had a cup of coffee in the cafe. And this old gentleman came in, and he sat down the other end, and I thought, well, I'll go and have a chat because he's probably a bit lonely, he's on his own. And I said, are you here for the Elliot Erwitt signing? And he said, I am. I said, it's funny there's only two of us here. And he said, it's even funnier than that, I am Elliot Erwitt. True story. I said, oh. And you know, nobody else arrived, nobody else came. And I thought, it's extraordinary. He's one of the greatest photographers in the world, a New York street photographer, Elliot Erwitt. Brilliant man. Nobody turned up. So I sat and talked to him. And I wanted to ask about Cartier-Bresson. I said, did Cartier-Bresson ever share anything with you that you thought was brilliant information you could share with me? And he said, yes, he did. His mantra was, learn the techniques and seize the moment. Learn the techniques, seize the moment. I think that applies to almost anything. I think it applies to this profession, absolutely. Learn the techniques, seize the moment. It's what we've heard a lot today. So I thanked him very much. I thought, well, that's absolutely terrific. And it seemed to me it was all about opportunism. The decisive moment, incidentally, was what Cartier-Bresson used to call the way he photographed things. He never did any work in the darkroom. He didn't do any editing, he didn't do any cropping, he didn't do any blocking or shading. He used to compose things in the viewfinder. And what he photographed was what he printed, and what he printed was perfect. He waited till the right moment to press the shutter. And I think there's an analogy there about waiting for the right moment. Opportunism. So the third element of this, are you getting all this, Mark? The third element of this is opportunism. So opportunism is important. You need to take your opportunities if you want to maintain a great reputation. Another hero of mine was a journalist. I'm involved in journalism, as many of you know, and from the age of 7, this is going to sound really nerdy, and I apologise. No, I don't apologise for it, for God's sake. I'm proud of it. From the age of 7, I would be in front of the radio, the transistor radio, at 8:45 on a Saturday morning, every Saturday morning, to listen to Letter from America. Now, Letter from America by Alistair Cook, who used to work at the Manchester Guardian, moved to America in the 1940s and explained America to the UK. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. He was my hero. I met him. I was lucky enough to meet him 3 times. And I asked him for advice, and he said, as a journalist, never miss a deadline, never waste a word. Never miss a deadline, never waste a word. And I thought that was such fantastic advice. And I was so impressed by Alistair Cook and his consistency, because for 52 years he delivered that 15-minute show, Letter from America. He recorded it in the States. And the most poignant one of all, and if you don't do anything else after this, go to the BBC website, look up Alistair Cook's Letter from America, and listen to the episode he recorded after the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. Because he was there. He was in the room. He was in that kitchen when Sirhan shot Bobby Kennedy. And it is the most extraordinary thing. In fact, he recorded it from his hospital bed. He was injured in the shooting and the melee that happened afterwards. And it is one of the most remarkable pieces of eyewitness journalism you will ever hear. He didn't waste a word, and he didn't miss his deadline. And in my own very small and humble way, I've kind of taken that on, because as many of you know, I produce a newsletter and a radio show, and it's actually a homage to Alistair Cook, because I've been doing it weekly now for only 14 years. I've got a way to go yet. I may never get to 52, but it's a weekly thing. I never miss a deadline, and that's important. It's consistency. So the fourth element of maintaining your reputation is being consistent. Consistency is very important. David mentioned this as well. You've got to keep in front of people so they know you're there. You've got to be visible all the time. We should really get back to the lakeside, shouldn't we? Because we've left them there way too long, sitting around the campfire. So we've got Aunt Em sitting around the campfire. I mentioned that the guy from Italy, John, you'd forgotten, hadn't you, William?
No, I'm saying the Eagles.
No, he's all right. He's immortal. He's fine. Don't worry about Prometheus. We'll get back to him. He's immortal. So we're over here by the lakeside. And we're thinking about who won the competition. John Polidori was the man who won the competition. John Polidori wrote a book called The Vampire. Vampyre. Brilliant book. It's only a short book. It's a short story almost. And years later, in fact, 80 years later, Bram Stoker got a copy of that book in a second-hand bookshop and based Dracula on it. So the story of Dracula came from this little house party, which I thought was fantastic. My Aunt Em was there at the creation of the Dracula myth, as it were, because John Polidori's book was the first vampire book. But it gets better. This gets better because she produced the second best story. Aunt Em produced the second best story. She came back to England, tried to get a publisher. Sadly, long story short, her lover ended up dying, and she came back and tried to get a publisher for the book a few years later. She couldn't get it published. She was a woman writer in 1820. So who was going to publish? No, she couldn't go anywhere. She tried lots of different publishers. Nobody wanted to do it. Eventually, the book was published anonymously. It was by Anonymous. And it became one of the best-known books in the English language. You know the book. The book was called The Modern Prometheus. Phil, you know the book because I've told you the story before. It was called The Modern Prometheus. You know it by its title, Frankenstein. Aunt Em was Mary. She was Mary Shelley, in fact. The house party was her, Percy Bysshe Shelley, Lord Byron, John Polidori. Quite a mastermind group, actually. Thinking about it. The earliest mastermind group, probably. So she wrote this book called Frankenstein, and it was because of her persistence. She tried and tried and tried and got all her friends. They knew it was a great book. I mean, they were both great books, The Vampire and Frankenstein, The Modern Prometheus, both terrific books. And if you ever get to read Frankenstein, The Modern Prometheus, and I would urge you to do that, it's a great book, but the story that you know is only the last chapter. The story of the monster, and incidentally, it's Victor Frankenstein that it's about. It's not about the monster, and the monster doesn't have a name. If I find anybody calling the monster Frankenstein, I slap them, and people know what I slap them with. What do I slap them with? A big wet fish. That's what I always slap people with. Do not call the monster Frankenstein. It's the story of Victor Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus. So the fifth element of that is persistence. Still with me, Mark? Good man. So, Mark's now going to reel off those 5 elements because he's been writing them down. What was it? Over-delivery, wasn't it? And immediate response. Instant rebuttal or instant response, that's right. And the third one was an O. You've got that there, Mark? Opportunism, very good. And the fourth one was? Consistency, fantastic. And the fifth one was? Up until this point, I've always loved Mark Lee. Persistent. So, OIOCP, what does that spell? Oiocop. Because it doesn't always make a word. I know yours does, but in the real world it doesn't. Sometimes it's just random letters. Oiocop. Let's get back to Prometheus. Poor guy, he's still chained to a rock. But he's immortal, so he's okay. So Prometheus was eventually freed by Hercules. Hercules arrived, remember the labours of Hercules? Hercules turned up, shot the eagle with a bow and arrow, unchained Prometheus. Fantastic. He was free. Bit older, bit sore around the liver, but free. Free. The thing is, who's the modern Prometheus? I'm talking about the modern Prometheus. Who is the modern Prometheus? Who brings fire, knowledge, and enlightenment?
We do.
You do. Thank you. You do. It's you. You bring fire to your audiences. You fire them up. You bring knowledge to organisations to make them change the way they work, and you bring enlightenment to individuals to make them achieve things they never thought possible. Because you are the modern Prometheus. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alan Stevens. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much.
Great job,
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alan Stevens, everyone. Fantastic and bang on time. Wonderful.